Welcome to this edition of Ramblings of an Old Fart podcast. Hello, my name's Craig Warren. I'm 71 years old. I've been married almost 53 years, father of 9 and grandpa to a bunch. I'm sort of retired. I retired at 65 to provide full-time care for my wife who has serious health issues. But lately I realized I needed something to do to keep my mind active, keep me sharp. So why not a podcast? I have a lot of experience. I've done a lot of things in my 50-some years in the workforce. I definitely have a lot of opinions. So what more would I need? I should mention that I have never been a member of a political party, and I do not intend to do so. My podcasts do not come from a political place, just from a factual and common sense place. Today I want to talk to you about something that I see a lot of in today's crazy world of politics, basically. People are kind of losing faith in the system. People want to check out. They're not sure where to go from here. So I want to kind of go into this a little bit and see if we can, give ourselves some kind of an idea where we go from here. It's kind of a heavy realization when it feels like the social contract, the unwritten agreement where the people grant power in exchange for protection and service, that it has been frayed or broken, or worse than broken. That frustration echoes a sentiment that has appeared throughout history, though, whenever a political class becomes more insulated and focused on its own survival than it is on the citizenry. By following George Washington's advice to avoid political parties, which he called frightful despotism in his farewell address, I'm looking at this from a bird's eye view. History gives us a fairly consistent roadmap of what happens when the gap between the rulers and the ruled becomes not a gap, it's more like a canyon, right? There's a huge divide. So when a civilization loses faith in its leaders and those leaders prioritize power over obligation, history generally suggests a few specific outcomes. One, we have the rise of an outsider, some kind of a populism thing. When the established political class, the elite, is viewed as corrupt or stagnant, the public often turns towards figures who promise to dismantle the system. These leaders often use language of the common person, so they can bypass the traditional party structure. And the result can lead to necessary reform, but it can also lead to like authoritarianism if the outsider decides that they're the only ones who can fix the system. What we're currently seeing here with threats of the government shutdowns and all that stuff, this political polarization, it's basically institutional decay and paralysis. That's the best way I can say it. They're just so polarized they can't get anything done. Parties begin to view the other side as an existential threat rather than just competitors with different ideas. This leads to a scorched earth kind of policy when shutting down the government or blocking appointments becomes standard tool of war, if you will. The result is the government ceases to function effectively, which further alienates the public, creating a feedback loop of distrust, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. In many cases, the people don't revolt with pitchforks, at least not at first. They revolt by checking out. People stop voting. They stop paying attention to the news. They stop participating in civic life because they feel their voice doesn't matter anymore. This often allows the political class to become more extreme because only the most radical voices remain engaged, further distancing the parties from the average person. This next section is what I call when honor and integrity vanish. Okay, in the Roman Empire, in the Roman Republic, I should say, that's where it started. There was a concept called cura and nonne, I believe is how you pronounce it, and it referred to the grain or the bread. And gravitas was dignity and substance. When the Roman leaders began to prioritize their own wealth and power over the specific factions, that surprised me. In the early days of our country, we didn't call them political parties. They were referred to as factions. I found that interesting. Anyway, the wealth and power of their specific factions over the stability of Rome, the Republic transitioned into an empire. The people eventually traded their political freedom for bread. The emperor at least could keep the lights on, keep bread on the table. So we have a couple other examples here too. We just discussed Rome, and they ended up, because their politicians couldn't get their stuff together, they actually lost the Republic and ended up becoming an empire. The revolutionary in France during the Revolutionary War there, the monarchy, because the monarchy had a total disconnect from the starving populace. Radical revolution came about, and that was the end result, and that instigated the rise of Napoleon. And then we have the Weimar era in Germany, pre-war. Hyperinflation and political paralysis in their parliament. And the outcome was the collapse of their democracy and the rise of totalitarianism. Washington's fear was that the parties would become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men would be enabled to subvert the power of the people. He essentially predicted that the party would become the master rather than the servant. And where do we go from here? History shows that these cycles usually end in one of two ways. We either have a great reset, a crisis of some kind, economic or social, forces the political class to reform or be replaced. And then we have the other one's internal renewal, which is a grassroots movement focusing on relocalizing politics, moving the focus away from the national and back to the communities and the states. Get those houses in order first and then work on the national. Okay, so let's take a look at how civilizations can pull themselves back from the brink of this political exhaustion that I think we're seeing right now. We can look at two major turning points. One that was forced from the bottom up, namely the Magna Carta, and one that was the systemic cleaning of house from within, which was the progressive era in the late 1900s or late 1800s to early 1900s. Both of the examples show that when political class loses its sense of obligation, the solution usually involves a radical shift in who holds the keys to power. The Magna Carta, 1215. In the early 13th century, King John of England was the embodiment of the leader that we've been describing here. I mean, he taxed the people heavily for failed foreign wars and other stupid things. He ignored traditional customs, and he treated the law was like it was, it's just a suggestion. It's not a law, it's just a suggestion. So the barons, the landowners, the major landowners there, the secondary political class, if you will, and the merchants, they finally reached a breaking point. They didn't want to overthrow the monarchy, but they wanted to bind the leader down to a set of rules. So they'd have come up with the Magna Carta, which established the revolutionary idea that the law is a power unto itself, and even the king is subject to it. It didn't fix everything overnight. King John tried to ignore it as often as he could, but it created a reset point. It gave the people a legal standard to point to every time a leader overstepped. It moved the civilization from a rule of man to a rule of law. And then we come to the progressive era we talked about, 1890s to 1920s. This was basically designed to break the party machinery a little bit. By the late 1800s, the U.S. looked very much like what we're seeing now. The political machines, like Tammany Hall, They controlled everything. The parties were so powerful that they chose candidates in like smoke-filled rooms. The average voter didn't get, it felt like he was just a spectator, didn't get an opportunity to do that. But when the people realized that the political class was purely self-serving, they didn't just complain, they changed the mechanics of the system. And here's how they did it. Before this, the party bosses chose the candidates, like we talked about. But through their efforts, the voters came up and set up so that we now have direct primaries. No, I think all states have direct primaries of some kind. That basically took a lot of the power away from some of those political bosses because now the people got to choose who was on the ballot. And then we had the 17th Amendment. Originally, our state senators were not chosen by the people. They were chosen by the state legislatures of each state. But it was found that quite often there were backroom deals to buy votes there. And so people didn't like that after a while, so they demanded that we have elections here and the people get to vote for their senators, not the party. Many states passed laws allowing citizens to bypass legislature entirely and put a law directly on the ballot for a public vote. That's your initiative and referendum laws. I've seen that. We've had that going on in the state of Utah recently. It's been kind of ugly, but I like the idea in general. And then we have the recall election legislative things. They created a fire the boss button, if you will, allowing citizens to remove an official before their term was up if they betrayed the public trust. Okay. When we look at these two successes, the pattern emerges. They don't just wait for a better person to run for office. They realize that good people can't fix a broken system, but a better system can restrain bad people. And here's some of the things that have really helped over the years, and that's journalism and whistleblowers. However, in today's world, our journalists do not seem to have the same character they did at one time. We seem to be polarized. Journalists are political too much, in my view. Whistleblowers is a good thing, and we have developed laws to protect them, but they don't seem to be working that great. But we still need to kind of keep doing it. If we see corruption in our politicians, we need to bring it forward. And then we have kind of more of a local focus a lot of times. Reformers start in cities and states and then move their way up to the national government. They focused on process, how we vote, how the money enters the politics rather than just the personalities. George Washington's warning about the parties was that they would eventually subvert the power of the people. The Progressive Era was essentially a massive attempt to take that power back by force of law. It shows that while the political class rarely gives up power voluntarily, they can be forced to yield when the public stops treating politics like a team sport and starts treating it like a management problem. In 2026 here, the Washingtonian perspective, that political parties are engine of division, is no longer just historical theater or theory. It has become a central driver for a mass modern political movement. As you can see, the cycle is repeating. Many Americans have reached a point of political exhaustion, is what I call it, where they view both parties as two halves of a single self-serving duopoly, if you will. Here's how people are currently using history's management strategies, though, to take back some of the control. Modern reformers have realized that as long as the system is a winner-take-all game between two teams, the leaders will never have an incentive to listen to the middle of the group. Here we have a couple of specifics. We have the ranked choice voting that's working its way through a lot of the states. In the 2024 election, Utah used that on a trial basis through, I don't know how many cities, 16 or 17 cities. People I talked to said they liked it. However, our state legislature did not ruin it. It was just passed as a trial 1-year thing, but I think they allowed it to sunset. I don't think they carried it forward. So the ranked choice, basically, you put everybody goes on the primary ballot, and then the top 2 or the top 4 or whatever goes on through, depending on the state and how it's set up. I kind of like that idea. It takes a lot of that power out of the political parties. Then we have a rise in some areas where there's a third party comes along. There's some independent parties, the forward party, different things. And if you couple that, if you want to do one of these parties, if you couple that with the ranked choice voting, I think that could work okay. Otherwise, those small parties just don't really seem to have a chance, because all of the party politics from the big parties is slanted against you. The Independent Center in 2026 midterms data shows that unaffiliated voters will be the largest voting bloc in several key battleground states. These are people that are just really tired of the party. I am one of those, definitely. I have never been a member of the party. I am still tired of them. Interestingly, some of the most successful reforms are happening right here in Utah. Recently completed this massive ranked choice pilot program. However, like I said, I did mention that I don't think they kept it going. I think it was allowed to expire. But we'll see what happens. But anyway, they found that the campaigns became more civil. The cost dropped by 40%. And 94% of the voters found the system easier and more representative. It proved that you don't have to be a radical to want a better system. Even conservative strongholds are finding that the old way of party-run politics is inefficient and expensive. Okay, here's some of the states that I'm finding that their vote isn't by party, actually, when you really get into it. Let's take a look. Alaska's been that way for a long time. But let's take a look. Alaska basically is a top 4 primary. All candidates run on one list. The top 4 move to the general election, where voters use ranked choice. Washington is a top 2 primary. All candidates run on one list. The top 2 vote getters advance, even if they're from the same party. And California is basically the same way. Louisiana is a little bit different. All parties run on a list, run at once. If somebody gets over 50%, then they just win immediately. They don't have to go to the general election. But if not, then the top 2 run. I kind of like that idea better. I'm not sure I like it paring it down to just 2, but we'll see. Anyway, then Nebraska, theirs is kind of unique too. Their state legislature is entirely nonpartisan. Once they get to the legislature, there are no Democratic or Republican caucuses in the state house. They just work as individuals. And that's the way it should be. And once you get elected, you're no longer Democratic or Republican. You're the representative of your district or representative of your state. And that other stuff shouldn't matter nearly as much as that job should. So here, if you want to support a system where integrity matters more than the party, then, here are the 3 choices that seem to be the most effective way to do that. We can support some of the nonpartisan groups in your state. However, I have a huge warning about that. We have seen it here in Utah. Pushing these organizations, you have to check these organizations out very carefully. Make sure they're not funded and influenced from foreign people or even out-of-state influence. Watch for my upcoming podcast on dark money. We've had this issue in Utah with this ballot initiative and referendum. There was so much money came in from out of state. And not only the money came in, but they just sent in and they just hired people to go gather signatures, and they got paid based on how many signatures they got. So, how certain are we that those signatures were really, truly genuine? We don't know. And that's part of the problem. So, the next thing happened here in Utah is I haven't found of it passed. Our state legislature just ended their session. It was House Bill 242, where it made a criminal offense for a signature gatherer to knowingly misrepresent what a petition actually does. So then you can advocate for the ranked choice voting in your area, and you can vote as an unaffiliated voter like I do. Don't participate in the party. Just go vote and vote your conscience. Okay, Washington's biggest fear was that Americans would become like the French or the late-era Aztecs, so focused on their side that they'd burn the house down to win an argument. He advocated for a national character that stood above party. Many of our founding fathers mentioned things like that: honor and integrity, a good moral fabric. Those are the things that they said were required in order to keep our republic strong. We need to take a good hard look at ourselves and our elected officials. Are they men of honor and integrity, good character, good moral values? Those are questions we have to ask when we go to vote. So I'm going to leave that with you for now. I think that's plenty to think about. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found it entertaining, educational, or thought-provoking. Join me next time, won't you? I'm Craig Warren, and this has been the Ramblings of an Old Fart podcast. God bless and keep you. Till next time.